Hello, every folks, and good evening. Today we begin following the misadventures of one Crustacia Crubton, 33rd of her name, originally hailing from Anna Maria Island. Now, she is a crab, a very adventurous crab, one that unfortunately had to leave her homeland after the first 32 crabs of her name were unfortunately stepped on by an unknown admiral from Domino. Of course, this did not include her. Now, after being hit by lightning out at sea, she decided to go create a new Anna Maria Island, one that can float, one that cannot be taken away, one that cannot be stepped on, and one that is forever a sailboat. So she began her adventure. This will be a very long and confusing adventure, but one that has to start somewhere, and of course, she has to learn how to pull and how to push rope and masts, as one does. Of course, she had to also learn the mechanics of her universe and begin staring at random objects, something that will eventually end up becoming fairly useful. Now, for now, she has to understand that she is herself a crab, somebody that is slightly more well-armored than the usual run-of-the-mill people of this world, and additionally, while she doesn't get any speed bonuses, she is going to be just that little bit more hardy, which is always going to help her. Now, she decides to go take her one shipmate, the one surviving crew member that isn't too scared to continue on with her adventure, Mr. Reeve over here, or Miss Reeve, rather. Apparently, according to our editor over there, it turns out that yes, she was actually hit by lightning off screen, and also had her level reduced to 1, as one does. So, they proceeded to go on with their sailboat, go off into the open seas in search of adventure. Now, of course, the downside of being put onto a path to go live permanently on this old sailboat, regardless of its personal connection to the captain, is, well, the downside that it can't exactly get much bigger, it can't exactly get much better, it can't exactly carry any more cannons. But, all the same, she seems determined to go make the most of this particular world, and also seems to be changing the rules of reality to make things a bit more difficult, including training new skills to everybody on this Earth, making sure that her map is a bit more dysfunctional, and additionally, just causing everyone's intelligence worldwide to go up a pretty significant amount. I'm not entirely sure how she did this, but this does seem to be the natural order of things, so we will simply proceed following along with their nature, going to the northwest here. Now, there are many routes that she could have taken at this point, including a very hellish one going down south, providing that she was interested in potentially setting up her own port, a new place to live. However, for the time being, she likes her safety sailboat and will continuing on this path. She will never leave this sailboat. The sailboat is the only member of this particular fleet, and as it seems like the rules of this particular engagement with the world do involve her forever being stuck to this sailboat, regardless of any limitations that this may bring. Now, first, this brought them to the little town of Port Midos, the closest town to the location that they started from, which seemed like a pretty good time for them to go and stock up on food. Thankfully, the boat in question was full of money and food, and additionally, she found inspiration with a new crab buddy over there on the beach, being reminded of all of her brothers and sisters that didn't make it, and of course, being inspired to go take a look at her skill list and potentially learn some new ways to maybe set fire to her enemies, maybe throw rocks at them. At this point, it's not really entirely clear what the plan forward will be, so instead, everyone stops to have a little bit of a bite to eat. They have some nice pie here. Now, how exactly they're making cream pie in this little port in the middle of nowhere, I'm not entirely sure. But it is always good to have friends, it is always good to have people on your side, and so she decides the best way to start getting some revenge is maybe do a little bit of privateering. Now, unfortunately, for the moment, it's going to be quite costly to be able to afford to take on a fleet of ships, especially on their little sailboat, and it seems relatively unlikely that they would survive the encounter. However, Reeve over here makes a pretty solid point that if they were to get themselves some allies in the bigger nations, then perhaps they might be willing to send an escort that could potentially go along with them, which is definitely worth considering down the road, but currently they are nowhere near any of those capitals, nor do they have any reputation to do so. Anyhow, they finish off their meal and they go off in search of additional adventures. But first, of course, you must stop and stare at all of the pictures. In this particular bar, we see a still life portrait of some individual or other, as well as many lanterns and chairs and things. As one does. Of course, if you don't stop to admire all the lanterns, is your adventure truly something worth writing home about? Clearly not. And at any rate, now that we've seen that she has inspected all of the barrels and is aware of how things are potentially contained, as well as the magical idea of rugs, she is now inspired by the sight of her previous crab friend to participate in some extreme violence, and so she begins going and concocting together a giant stack of Molotov cocktails. As one does in order to get past stress. Obviously, everyone deals with things in their own way, and when it comes to Miss Crustacia over here, of course, this was the only way that it was ever going to play out. After all, she is off to get revenge on the one that ended up crushing her original home island and potentially set up a new one along the way. We will see how her adventures end up going and panning out as time permits, but we will continue to follow her as long as is humanly possible. Unfortunately, it probably will not be possible to see every single second of this particular adventure, nor will we be interested in seeing certain sections where perhaps you might just be sailing over the open ocean for hours on end. At all of that being said, though, next, this takes us to our next destination of Rayleigh. This is a little town nearby there that happens to specialize in trading gold, but they do have a little bit of food to go feed the hungry party here, and they seem to have actually brought along a friend from that last port, who actually completely changed the color of her clothes as soon as she joined the party. It's kind of interesting how that works, but at any rate, them and their sailboat hat are interested in getting a little bit of work here. It seems. So it seems like they want to do a little bit of good here, want to be good by the people here that fed the crew, and, well, unfortunately, they're being told they simply don't have enough people. They need a crew of 5, and so, hey, they find this fella over here. Interesting how that works. And, as one does, they stop to take a picture of, they stop to take a look at the melted metal over there, and they seem to have found a French blue guy. That's interesting. Didn't know the French were out here, but sure, why not? At any rate, they are tasked with clearing out a local mine that appears to have an infestation of some variety. It seems like they have miners disappearing, and somebody stealing all of their ore, and, oh, well, it seems like they're going to start pilfering all of the ore and lanterns themselves. Okay. Alright, we're certainly off to a start here, but they have to be paid for their services. They were offered to be paid in cash, but we're not going to judge. Obviously, they are off on a little bit of an adventure, and I suppose nobody could technically account for these things going missing any other way. But it is certainly just the way of the world over here. Oh, and would you look at that? They seem to have run into a sand snake over here, hanging out in one of the corners. This very well might be part of the reason that these miners have gone missing, although just one snake on their own, this doesn't necessarily seem like the biggest threat in the world. However, with the music picking up nicely, as well as the snake in general getting very aggressive, we find out very quickly what potentially might have happened to everybody, and additionally find out that the currently on-board Frenchman over here actually seems to have had the ability to use his spices to bring somebody back to life. That's fascinating. However, he's not much of a puncher. Hopefully that will improve over time. However, for the time being, it seems like our main method forward, our main way getting ahead here, is going to be these fire bombs over here. It seems like she might have potentially made them for a reason. Maybe this crab is a bit more well-traveled than we assumed. However, oh well, it looks like they potentially are considering going and setting their own crewmates on fire. I suppose they might be well aware of how this universe potentially works, and maybe they're not particularly worried about any kind of long-term consequences from this. I know personally I'd be a little bit worried about the morale implications of all of this, but it seems like everybody's quite on board. I mean, after all, I suppose this was a fairly cold cave, so we do have at least that to potentially consider. At any rate, we see Mr. Fella going forward and playing a little bit of defense for the group here, while the unfortunate beret wearer up there ended up getting knocked unconscious. But hopefully those smelling salts will be able to, well, assist in the future. It doesn't seem like they'll be much good here. This first fight is not looking particularly great at the moment, but it seems like Reeve, the first mate, seems to have a plan over here to start inspiring everybody to just simply punch harder. Now, of course, they can punch harder. This doesn't necessarily mean they can hit their targets, but, an attempt was made. With that being said, it doesn't really look particularly good for Reeve here either. However, they are still putting up a good fight. They're still giving it their all. Let's see if they potentially can go and survive this particular encounter. It seems like Crustacia is potentially bending reality a little bit in order to decide where on Earth she might potentially move to. It's kind of interesting. I thought she was going to go move to that island she was setting up, but hey, who am I to judge? At any rate, it seems like she's attempting to either push or punch this thing. I mean, punching seems to work. It seems to hurt it, for sure. It does seem like, Reeve can put out quite a decent punch there, as well as Fella, although, unfortunately, once again, he's having a little bit of a hard time actually reaching anyone. But, thankfully, that fire seems to be taking its toll on the giant sand snake over here, who seems to still be dancing absolute circles around everyone. Hopefully that fire will be enough to see this party live to see another day. Otherwise, this might be the end of their adventure right here. At any rate, it seems like Fella is a little bit confused, attempting to hold his shield out in front of him instead of very close in front of him. So, it is what it is. I'm sure this has nothing to do with some entity outside of our control's input being a little bit wonky that day. Perhaps due to sleep deprivation or something. It's unclear, but whatever. Anyway, it seems like Crustacia is now going to be throwing even more fire on this snake. It's honestly a little bit of a wonder how they're able to breathe down here, but all the same, things seem to be working out okay, and that snakehead finally seems to have gone away, with the entire party having learned quite a bit from the experience, even becoming scholars. That's fascinating. Usually scholarly pursuits are a little bit less violent, but hey, if it gets you through college, it gets you through college. You do that bar brawl. Now, we take a look at the journal that Crustacia's been putting together here. We see that she's learning to practice to set fires. That fight seems to have definitely taught a few things here and there. And potentially, it looks like she's actually learning to push back as well. So if somebody ends up going and punching her, she potentially throws them backwards, even against a wall. That could potentially be pretty useful, I would think. And she's kind of considering going down that path of maybe becoming a scholar at some point, but currently everyone's just sort of seemingly keeping their eyes open as she goes and turns her eyes to the crew and sees what they potentially could go and approve about themselves as well. Obviously, with that first encounter, even without weapons, they were decently able to hold their own. Unfortunately, they probably should have prepared before going in here, but for the time being, that fire seems to have been stronger than anything they could have done anyway. So, this is good. Reeve mentions that she's potentially going to go learn to go punch somebody unconscious. That could potentially be useful. And then we see Bozer over here. This was the sort of bruiser of the group, as it were, learning to go throw somebody backwards, as well as potentially pull them backwards. We'll see how that's going to play out for them. We see old fella over here with his afro, the defensive guy of the bunch, is potentially learning to swagger forward to potentially, make himself feel better. I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily a technique, but if it works for a peacock, it works for a sailor, I suppose. And then we have our revival Frenchman and his spices, who seems to be going for more defensive abilities in order to keep the party even more protected. It does seem very fortuitous that he came with that particular ability, and honestly, it seems like they got extremely lucky in that particular regard. That seems like something that will potentially be very useful going forward. At any rate, they go and notice that there is a spot missing from these tracks over here, and they go ahead and shove them into place. There we go. Thank you, Reeve, for going and repairing this place. It seems like they really are going above and beyond. They were only tasked to go fix that snake, but they're even fixing the infrastructure, which is honestly good for them. But they seem to think that there's something at the end of this hallway, potentially something that might potentially notice them. Wonder what they're so worried about. I'm sure it's nothing. At any rate, it does seem, though, like there maybe are some miners up there who seem to have their mining lights still on. It's odd how they are armed, and it seems like they have chosen violence today, and yes, they have, unfortunately, set the confused miners on fire, so that's an interesting choice for sure. I thought they were here to save them, but that's all right. I'm sure I'm sure it's just a bit of a misunderstanding, and they'll go ahead and clear this up right away. It's all right. Their brethren are outside. I'm sure they'll get it. It's dark, friendly fire happens. They were told there was nobody in here. It's fine. Nothing to really worry about. And oh no, they seem to be fighting back. All right, well, it's okay. Eventually, cooler heads will prevail. Obviously, this is a professional group. They are going to make the right choice in the end, and they are setting them on fire. All right. That's it's going to be a little bit harder for them to maybe talk their way out of this situation. But that's all right. Again, cooler heads will prevail. Obviously, with this fire, it will make it a bit easier for them to maybe see what's going on. And Crustacia setting somebody else on fire. All right. I mean, at this point, all ends of the room are on fire. It's no longer a case of mistaken identity. They have their mining, and okay, Reeve is getting in on the party as well. All right. It's okay. It's okay. I'm sure they'll understand. Maybe they'll just get knocked unconscious. Earlier, the snake bit them. It was not particularly fatal, and it seemed like the snake ran away potentially. Maybe to go fight another day. So maybe this isn't as dangerous as everyone thinks it is. It's unclear, but oh well. See. There we go. Crustacea's dodging things. Potentially, that's a little bit less for everyone to need to talk back later. And Bozer has been shanked in the neck. Oh, okay. Well, at least they can hold their own. And fireballs are now being thrown. It seems like firearms are, in fact, involved. Okay. It seems like the Frenchman has brought his spices to go bring Mr. Bozer back. And Crustacia is going to... What's her plan here? Is she going to potentially talk everyone down? Are we going to let cooler heads prevail? Maybe. And she is setting matches at this poor man's feet. Okay. Okay. Maybe Reeve sees the situation here. Maybe he wants to talk to everybody. And get everybody to understand a little. Oh no, they're encouraging this. All right. Perhaps I should maybe let go of my optimism that things may be working out a little nicer here, but you know what? It is the way of crabs to be a little bit violent sometimes. Obviously, when you have the means to simply molt out of your entire existence every few months or so, when it comes to the statutes of limitations, they have a tendency to be a little bit shorter when they're very literally potentially just an entirely different person, is what I'm going to go ahead and assume. Unfortunately, this wasn't particularly covered in our study of this subject, but it does seem to at least make sense from what we're looking at here. However, all of these miners are currently suffocating and or burning to death, as it were, and they are fighting back. There's one more of the crew that get themselves knocked out, as it were. Oh no, that makes two. Okay, well actually these miners, they might make it out of this all the same. Perhaps we picked the wrong crew to follow, But this is the way of things. This is the way of nature sometimes. People misunderstand each other, and it's just an unfortunate fact of life. It seems like Crustacea's maybe got some ideas here, there, and yeah, no, it seems to involve more firebombs, unfortunately. These things, though, again, are maybe forgivable. I suppose in time we'll find out. It does make a little bit of sense looking at this situation. As the Admiral was last seen wearing blue, it is very possible that Crustacia simply thinks maybe everyone that wears blue is associated with him. And I suppose we'll see in due time what the truth is of the matter, but it is very difficult to look at a situation like this. These graphic scenes, however, do represent the reality of their current situation. Unfortunately, the life of a sailor, especially a crab sailor, off on, a lot of revenge. Oh, and it does seem like Crustacia is currently booting people through fire in order to make that fire hurt even more. Huh. Well, at any rate, such is the nature of things on the seas. It's hard to judge the morality of things, especially when the crab that you're following appears to have been electrocuted. Seems to have been electrocuted by a miner that is also a wizard. That's rather odd. Perhaps these creatures aren't miners after all. maybe there's something more to this. Maybe there's some kind of odd subterranean nightmare creatures that just sort of happen to take the place of people every now and then. That's... honestly, that's a little bit of a new thing to me, but hey, you know what? If our subject of today happened to have figured this out, more power to them. At any rate, it seems like the last standing member, Reeve, over here, does have a little bit of a plan, funneling them down this hallway in order to potentially put them all into a choke point and set them on fire. Now, it does seem like fire is sort of their answer for everything. I don't know why a crab who is potentially worried about being flambéed might potentially pick something a little bit less on the nose to enact their revenge with, but I suppose if they see it fitting, then they see it fitting. It seems like currently there is one unknown flashlight-headed creature over here with a spear remaining, as well as another one that's carrying some throwing axes on him. But they are slowly making their way down this hallway, slowly... Oh dear, how absolutely dreadful. Somebody has gone and turned on a dryer in the studio. Who would do such a thing? Oh well, I suppose we'll just have to carry on despite these circumstances. After all, it seems like there's only currently 5 minutes left in this documentary anyway. So it seems like Reeve over here is currently hiding behind a minecart attempting to ambush the last of these apparent sentient flashlights. And yeah, it seems like everything may well work out for the crab crew here. And sure enough, it looks like that is the final decisive action right there. And yeah, nothing but flames left in this hallway. I sure hope that everybody else made it out all right. After all, oh well, I guess everything turned out just fine. Afterwards, they seem to all have left the mine and decided to have a little bit of a snack, having some pepper blossoms, interestingly enough, which seemed to have helped out morale quite a decent bit. And in fact, it seems like, well, it seems like Crustacia here is actually feeling pretty confident in their odds, which is good to see. It's especially nice to see somebody get over being, well, brutalized in a mine in such a cheery manner. But it seems like they went back and decided to see if the job was actually completed after they went and got their bearings, and sure enough, it seems like everyone's right as rain, as it were. It seems also that they found a little bit more iron to go and potentially sell back to the locals. Not exactly much of a charity work was done here, but they did end up clearing out that tunnel. Also, it seems if they were a little bit more enterprising of adventurers, they might have potentially brought along a rope and python, which would have allowed them to go down that hole. But in the meantime, they can take some additional mercenary work to go drop a letter off at a nearby town, and additionally restock for their journey. In fact, noticing that they actually didn't go through all of it the first time, and it also seems that now things are being rearranged in the studio. Oh well. But it seems like they'll actually go ahead and buy some gold for their journey, attempting to actually take on a little bit of mercantile work. Ooh, I've actually recognized this grove before. I went and visited there in a little bit of a documentary, and oh dear. Well, I was going to say that the spiders there were actually very fascinating creatures. They would put together these very nice looking nests, but unfortunately, I don't think we'll be seeing them anymore, but they do seem to have found a fossil on their way over there, and also seem to have found another town in that same general region. So, you know, good for them. I will miss visiting those spiders. Unfortunately, they don't get as big as the spidest in other parts of the world, but all the same, this will be just fine. However, they do get to their first larger port city in the area and actually make their first ever profitable trade. This actually would be a pretty interesting strategy. They don't really have a whole lot of space to work with on that little ship of theirs, so there's not really a whole lot of room to be able to go and buy and sell many things. So it's fascinating to see whether or not this will actually pay out for them. However, that being said, it appears that the crab crew has actually decided to go and take on a job as researchers for the local church, which is certainly probably going to at least pay off for them. However, they seem to have discovered a door and a fossil and many other things, and in fact, they have gone from nearly completely broke to nearly $3,500 in their pocket. That's rather impressive for about 5 minutes worth of work. And additionally, they will now be apparently looking around the room, jotting down notes on where the research captain here has actually left his keys, as well as other things he just never noticed along the wall, and apparently he's quite impressed with this, giving about another extra $250. It's good to know that our research is being handled by somebody very astute in this particular way. At any rate, they proceed to go on to the local restaurant and write exhaustive reports on furnaces and forks and ovens and beer mugs. As one does, you have to make sure to keep track of every single note on your journey, and it seems like they will once again be stopping to have a little bit of dinner to improve everyone's mood. And in fact, this place's local specialty is the absolutely amazing crisp baguette, something that the local Frenchman of the team here is very appreciative of. However, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that really counts as a specialty as much as barely getting by. But to each their own, of course. Everyone has to have their own place that they come from. At any rate, they run into their first Rossman over there, a interesting creature without a face. He actually listens through the sides of his head, for all intents and purposes, wearing a fake face on his face to pretend that he has a face. Quite fascinating things. But at any rate, it seems like that's where everybody will be laying down to rest for the evening. And after such a long journey, they really deserve to have a little bit of a break. Well, that will be about that. I will be signing off, and I will be joining you in the further adventures of Crustacia, the 33rd? I don't remember. Is crab. There's 33 crabs, the other 32 got stepped on. Anyway, carrying on.